in the visits that we undertook to some police forces, it is clear that it is still happening. I obviously have gone quite hard, and I'm conscious that there are more legally qualified people sat around the table than myself, but I have gone quite hard on the fact I think we really have to get a grip of how we treat children. This again dates back to Rotherham, where I listened to the testimony of a young woman there. She was a child at the time that was multiple raped by multiple men on multiple occasions as a 13th birthday present, in the knowledge that her perpetrator said it would be not seen as rape, which she believed. So I've always sort of thought, why do we have this sort of difference when from 12 to 13, and why do we have that? And I'm sure there's a myriad of good reasons why people historically did, but I think it's time to draw a line under that and see children as children. And I think if we did that, that would have more profound implications across society anyway. And I think there's lots of people out there worrying about lots of other things to do with adolescents and teenagers. And I think this would just be one very sort of clear historic law change that I feel, given we haven't looked at rape law since 2003, I think it is. I think the time is right to do that, and it would be a very fitting outcome, I think, to the audit. The other thing I wanted to just put in some context is I'm calling for, and they have agreed to, a national police operation. I think the big thing I want to happen is a national criminal operation. I suggested, and they've agreed, it's led by the National Crime Agency. That's in part because Stovewood, which is the NCA, were brought in to South Yorkshire Police in 2014, actually after Alexis Jay's report, not mine. I was there when Stovewood arrived, and I can see over their years of doing good police work that they've built up a very high level of expertise, which actually you can see other forces could benefit from, and it would also give confidence to victims. And really that's my sort of big ask, I suppose, is that. There's an irony, but anyway. And then the second part of that, and what I envisaged, was a sort of independent commission that would grasp the two. So you'd have a police criminal investigation, and then obviously I have asked for, and they have agreed to do, a national inquiry where I want very strong footprints locally. I want it to be a different type of inquiry to perhaps things that have happened before. And I do see a link between those two. I think that they should feed into each other. The national data on grooming gangs is, sound not often accused of being a civil servant, but incomplete and unreliable is what is written here. I would say that's putting it mildly. And I feel very strongly on issues that are as searing as people's race, when actually we know the prejudice and racism that people of colour experience in this country, to not get how you treat that data right, actually I think is a different level of public irresponsibility. Sorry to put it so bluntly, I didn't put it that bluntly yesterday, but I think it's particularly important if you are collecting those sorts of issues to get them 100% right. And if you are not getting them 100% right, please don't use them to justify another position, which is potentially what happened. So, and that may be well-meaning, it may not be well-meaning, but that's how the data has run. And I think the sooner we bring a close to that, and either, my view is collect something or don't collect something. For God's sakes, don't half collect it. That's a bloody disaster, frankly. And so then, I think it's a matter now of public record. We dug deeper into 3 police force areas where there's a clear higher rates of child sexual exploitation offending, and dug deeper into those to see whether they had established the facts and figures, and they had established the facts and figures much more than the national data. That then meant I was somewhat tougher, actually, in the way I've just talked about the national data, because if I know it can be collected in large police forces effectively, why can't I collect that nationally? Do you see me added to the sort of sense, oh dear God, what on earth have you done here? So I think it's clear that if you look at those three large police forces and their data, one is historic, to be fair, the other two are live, then the disproportionality issue is clear, and obviously they ask for, when they ask for ethnicity, they largely, one stops at Asian, the other stops at Pakistani heritage. And again, I can only feel the pain of those communities to know that it's all bundled together in one big grouping, and how unhelpful that is to the very communities that you are talking about. So again, I think that that's not a great way for public policy to be done, even if it's... And I went into other less scientific ways of trying to see what was going on with serious case reviews, which we can come to, which is a matter, it could be a subject topic for your fellow committee all of its own, what's happening in the world of serious case reviews and children's data. But we went there and examined that. Just as a note of caution, when we asked the good people of Greater Manchester Police to help us look at the data, we also collected, I think it's in the report, what was happening with child abuse more generally. And of course, so if you look at the data on child sexual exploitation suspects and offenders, it's disproportionately Asian heritage. If you look at the data for child abuse, it is not disproportionate, and it is white men. So again, just note to everybody really outside here rather than in here, let's just keep calm here about how you interrogate data and what you draw from it. I think I've said that I think the sort of poor recording in the criminal justice system, but not just in the criminal justice system, we have strong views, which you've seen in the audit, about children's services and local authorities and this extraordinary change, your Home Affairs. So you've got crime recording of child abuse here going up, and you look over at colleagues in local government, in children's services, and certainly see that in, I think, children on child protection plans for sexual abuse is at an all-time low in the last 30 years. And, you know, we thought, why are we the first people to open that cupboard and have a look at it? Because that tells you something, that if you were trying to sort this out, you might have a different view of it. And I often think that the Department of Health get a hospital pass, pun intended, just bringing a note of levity into a serious session. But, you know, honest to God, the national or absence of national data from the Department of Health world is woeful. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that you will know as Home Affairs colleagues is that quite often victims are actually all there in the health world, and sometimes the health world gets those people to our world so we can prosecute the people that are harming them. And so it really is an important issue that this isn't just something that's for the Home Office or for the Ministry of Justice. I think there's a responsibility on the Department of Health and the Department of Local Government, and very much the Department of Education, not to see this as something that's down in, you know, a bit of 2 Marsham Street. And I'm worried about that because we've talked about it relentlessly. I don't think this is the first Select Committee or Public Accounts Committee I've been before asking for better sharing of data between services and agencies. And I think I put in one of the recommendations, we need to look at how we make that mandatory, and therefore if something isn't mandatory or people don't do it, what consequences are they going to face this time round? Because it strikes me that it's not done. Now, part of that is, and again, I'm sure you know this possibly more than I did, that I didn't realise until I went back in to do this audit at the sort of paucity really of technology to support the police in what they're doing. I didn't realise that, you know, I was there when the tragedy of Sohan happened, and that we knew at that point that if we'd had better data sharing, there's a possibility that we might have saved those girls' lives. There's certainly an absolute clarity that intelligence would have been much faster in order of either avoiding it or actually finding that dreadful human being earlier. And we've known that forever onwards. And so I think there is also an issue, which is I just feel that, you know, the Home Office can't drag their feet on, sorry, that's a bit tough thing to say, but they shouldn't drag their feet on looking at police intelligence systems, given we're living in the 21st century, and that probably everybody in this room could connect within seconds. Yet we had Bedfordshire Police rightly finding a young boy, as it happened, that was being, in my mind, trafficked to London, but the data intelligence system didn't make it easy for them to find that he was in Deptford and being circled and dealt with by predators. And so I just found that hard to understand, and I realise it's not a big, massive issue to the public necessarily, but it's a very big issue for the system. And then the last thing I wanted to say, if I may, Dame Karen, is that, you know, none of the issues in the audit, sadly, are new. And actually, I felt that other colleagues possibly could have found that if they'd looked harder before us. You know, we didn't do anything particularly clever. We just put together the facts as best we could and presented them in as straight bat as possible. So that always causes me a bit of concern. I like to think I'm clever sometimes and find something new, and most of the time, as I head into 40 years in public service, you find the same thing, and what you have to do is be brave about dealing with it. And I suppose that's the last thing I wanted to say, is that, you know, the tone that we need to set is that we need national reset when it comes to children and when it comes to child abuse, and within child abuse, child sexual exploitation. And I think that's why I've put together a sort of package of recommendations that include consent through to sorting out taxis, with, you know, a national criminal investigation and a national inquiry sandwiched between the two. I hope that's a helpful start.
No, thank you very much, and that helps to set the scene for us and our questioning. And I think I read your report and felt rather unwell as to just how much of this was familiar and hadn't been joined up, and that is a great frustration for all of us who serve in public life. We are cross-party, but we are a team working together to try and establish how we can help scrutinise government and the work of the Home Office. And with that in mind, colleagues are very acutely aware that this is a very serious issue, and one that is not one that we need to start having tribal party politics involved in. So I'm going to start the questioning, and I'd like to start with Jake Richards.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for all your work, Baroness Casey and your team. I mean, it's quite an exceptional piece of work in a short period of time, which must have been very difficult to put together. So very grateful. What comes across in the report and in your opening statement, in particular your personal note, Baroness Casey, at page 11, is just the kind of extreme sense of disappointment, and that word is probably mild, and you could have used stronger language at what you found. I just want to get a sense of the evidence base for that disappointment. What are we talking about? How did the audit, in broad brush terms, realise that things had certainly not